Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Drika, the Briar Maiden of Woe, has had it up to here with these pesky skaven, and she's been tasked with ridding the land of their filth once and for all. We have the Wood Elves versus the Skaven in this Warhammer World Championship matchup between SHOWtime and Yurine Kotori. So for the Wood Elf front line, it is going to be just a bunch of Dryads going to be spread across a nice wide spread formation. Going to be able to withstand any of that long range firepower coming their way. Going to be heavy on the range with Glade Guard spread across that secondary line. Going to be mixed in with some Starfire Shafts as well, so they do have those flaming attacks against any of those regenerating units for the Skaven. Backline is going to be some Glade Riders with some Wild Riders as well to boot for some nice quick mobility to really contend the mobility of the Skaven with those Wolf Rats and like the Packmasters, while those Rat Ogres and the like being a little pesky nuisance indeed. Now we do have a couple of Waystalkers going to be up in front, going to be looking to snipe out some of the characters of the Skaven, and they're going to be having that Arrow of Kurnos to help with that task. For the Lord, as I mentioned before, it is going to be Drika, and she is coming in with just her Pendulum, so that is all for her spells. And unfortunately, taking a quick little look over at the Skaven side, not going to be having any super good targets, but definitely very good against like Storm Vermin and the like that, in case they are kind of looking to go a little bit more heavy metal. Of course, she has her Rouse to Wrath, the summon of Dryads, nice getting into that back gun line. And then it is just going to be her rest of her base abilities. So for the Skaven, it is going to be a bunch of Clan Rats in that front line, going to be taking the brunt of the assault, and they are going to be backed up by Quad Jezzails. Definitely not something you're going to be seeing every day. That is a lot of range firepower going the way of the Wood Elves. Normally, at most, you're going to be seeing like 3, and that's even in some very select few matchups. For the spellcaster, it is going to be a Plague Priest. Plague Priest is going to be rolling on in with both of its summons, and we do have that Bound Pestilent Breath, and then we have Vermintide and Pestilent Birth, so some Clan Rats and some Plague Monks to be thrown in to just kind of slow it down the approaching Wood Elves with those Clan Rats, and then those Plague Monks is where that damage is going to be done. We do have some Warp Grinders as well, just kind of help slow things down, just kind of keep all of these Jezzails up and operational for as long as possible. They do have that Seismic Snare and that Warp Quake, so to kind of lock things down and do a little extra damage in an AoE centered around the unit. For the quick mobility, we do have those Wolf Rats, 2 of which are the Poison variant, and 1 is the one that has magical attacks and armor piercing. So just trying to get into those archer lines with these guys and just kind of keeping things at bay. Normally you would expect to see a little bit of mass with some Rat Ogres, but instead going to be electing for just some Clan Rat Spears then in the backline. Not even going to be seeing a whole lot of Skaven Slaves. I think only this one is going to be there. Normally this is a little different style army than you're going to be seeing with the Skaven for the most part, which this is probably going to be a little bit has to do with the player who is playing him, and that is Yurine Kotori, who is from the Chinese scene. If I might be right on that, might not be. Don't know those characters very well. And then we also have an assassin coming in with, looks like we have the the Assassin's Trophy on that kit. And then we also, for the Lord, it is going to be a Master Assassin, which is going to be bringing one little neat ability, Looming Dread, but kind of interesting seeing that Master Assassin over Stickage. But Looming Dread does give minus 22% missile resist, minus 48% speed, and minus 24 melee defense, and that is only to Lords and Heroes. However, with the build that they have brought, that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, as they have those 4 Jezzails going to be target practice for sure, as they're just going to be lighting up the approaching Wood Elves. But those are the armies, so let's get things rolling on in, as the shots are going to be raining, as the sky is just going to be lit up with the smell and the sight of Warpstone, as the shots going to be hitting these Dryads, doing a nice little bit of damage on that initial approach. But both of the Waystalkers are going to continue plucking away their shots. I think they're going to be targeting this Plague Priest, trying to bring that guy down. Looks like most of the shots going just a little high, hitting those Clan Rats. But a Summon is going to be going down, just trying to get a little delay down. First one does get a little canceled there, but this one does go off. Just going to be slowing down these Dryads on the approach. But the Wood Elves, they are going to be doing most of their damage with their ranged, even though one of the Glade Guard with Starfire Shafts is getting pretty much deleted right off the get-go. There is still a bunch more arrows supposed to be firing away at the Skaven formation, and they should be targeting these Giselles front and foremost, doing a nice little bit of damage there. A nice little Dryad summon, though, just going to be taking the brunt of the Clan Rat charge here, as they're going to be getting a little bit damage in. The Glade Riders with Spears going to be hitting this summon, just trying to break them down, free up their own Dryads to kind of get into the rest of the Skaven, trying to close that distance, get into this backline, and one of the Giselles already starting to take a bit of damage on that approach, and a beautiful pendulum going to be arcing its way right through these Clan Rats, continuing on down the line, and just maybe clipping these Clan Rats here. But that is going to be breaking that front line. A little Pestilent Breath here, but it is going to be going just a little shy of those Dryads. We get some Plague Monks just to kind of slow it down, but those are just the Malevolent Dryads. It is just a summon after all. I think that Plague Monk summon going to be a little bit of a waste. Wild Riders with Shields going to be getting engaged on the flanks, just trying to batter things down, but they really need to start putting some pressure in this back line. There is still plenty of Giselles, and the Skaven have done a very nice job of kind of pushing their front line up and out of the way, keeping these Glade Guard with Starfire Shaft. If we take a look at that range here, we'll be able to see they are just on the very fringes, so they still are able to kind of fire in against the Giselles. So the Skaven are going to try and push a little bit farther just to keep those Glade Guard out of range of their range units. However, that Plague Priest does take a mighty amount of arrows, and I believe that thing is going to be going down once and for all. These Way Watchers or Way Stalkers going to be able to get some nice damage done on the retreating Plague Priest. We get a little collapse here, though, in the back line as the Wolf Rats with Poison collapse upon these Dryads. And then more and more of the Dryad just kind of starting to put more pressure onto backline. The front line of the Skaven is starting to break. However, some of the Clan Rat Spears are getting into some of the range units of the Wood Elves. And they're all of these Giselles still online and operational. Warp Grinders going to be making sure that these Wild Riders aren't going to have an easy time getting into that back line. However, one of the Assassins has been taken out of the picture. And if we take a look kind of out at the field, both of the Waystalkers still a nice and fresh as a daisy, getting some nice little bit of damage in. And Dryka probably does not want to be assaulting this assassin here. The assassin should be able to easily take down Dryka. However, Dryka seems to be landing a few hits, so I think the assassin really is going to start pulling ahead in this little duel. That assassin is meant for that kind of engagement. Warp Grinders trying to catch out some of these Wild Riders with shields, but they do get shut down. I think some of that comes down with they were just kind of getting focused down by all of these Glade Guard and tried to catch them even if it wasn't quite the ideal unit, but they got quickly shattered, and the Wood Elves pulling ahead in that balance of power. Just way too many archers here for these Giselles to really kind of counteract them. As one of them gets routed off, two more are really just being pressured back, as now these Wild Riders dealing with these Wolf Rats are going to be starting to turn their attention now to these long range units as they start kind of picking apart that back line. And I think this is just about going to be it for this match, as the Skaven do it going very, very strong, getting kind of beat down here, as the Wood Elves are going to be kind of just cruising on through to a finish here, getting a little more pendulum action in, just going to be wrecking through the Giselles. Not the most ideal target, but probably the best target that is still left. Might be enough to cause it to rout, but I think these Wild Riders are going to be more than up for the task, and it's all the range units going to start peppering in. I think that is just going to be about army losses. The Assassin was able to dish out a little bit of damage to Drake, but she did retreat back to her own lines. Both the Waystalkers then just continuing to get some nice bit of damage in over the course of the fight, and I think that is going to be all she wrote for Game 1. That is going to be army losses. Wood Elves take Game 1. So we'll take a little look at the after battle report here in just a sec, update that scorecard, and then we'll be getting on into our next game in just a second. So Showtime takes that first one. Wood Elves going very well in this matchup. They are probably favored at this point, especially with the nerfs that the Skaven got. It did kind of hurt this matchup just a bit for them, but I do think that some Poison Wind, like maybe a Globadier, or I think the Mortars in particular would have been nice to have, but of course that is what those Waystalkers are there for, and just the sheer volume of archers is just really good at kind of dishing out that damage into those mortars, but mortars are also very good at dealing with the archers of the Wood Elves. Before the units here, we'll just kind of go over the values real quick. Giselles got some value, but again, not quite enough, not really what they needed to. And they were just kind of too outgunned, which is kind of interesting to say when you're thinking about these Giselles. But yeah, just all those archers, they were just able to pick apart these Giselles a little too easily. And then just the rest of the units, I think you just need a little bit. Just take some of these Clan Rats, make them Skaven slaves, and that'll be able to afford you a bit more in terms of like mass, like some Rat Ogres. poison wind mortars and the like, something like that for a little bit more DPS at range. And then like the Plague Priest, I think was just too big of a target as well. Maybe a good idea, but at the same time, it's like the Wood Elves are very good at sniping out large targets. I mean, the larger they are, the easier it is for them to do it. But they're just good at sniping out targets in general. And the Plague Priest just made a big target over the battlefield. And that was exactly where all those arrows did go. Unfortunately, that meant a lot of those summons were kind of off the picture for most of that fight. Assassins, not really able to generate too much value either. This Master Assassin did get some value from engaging in Drika, but overall, just not quite enough to really make ends meet. On the Wood Elf side, Wild Riders getting a lot of kills, but not necessarily a whole lot of values. That is kind of how it is against the Skaven. There is plenty of units on the field. I mean, there was almost 1,400 for the Skaven, so really there is going to be plenty of kills to go around. Just really having that mobility, though, is really kind of what they needed. Just something to help kind of put that pressure on the back line, but really all of these archers, one of these guys getting 1,600, 600, 4 or 5, and more, I think exactly the same on these two values. So, but yeah, plenty of value for the archers, and that really was where most of that was created. The Waystalkers themselves just free to fire throughout the course of that fight, doing a lot of good work, and then Drika just there for a little bit of assistance. Normally, you'd expect to see at least a little bit more spell casting. I mean, just the Pendulum is very situational to have, and it's very nice to have that Earthblood to boot as well, just for healing, especially if you're going to be bringing like cavalry at all. It's nice to really get that healing off. I guess I'm really expecting to be just using that Pendulum just to really shatter that front line as quickly as possible, but in the end it did work out well for the Wood Elves, so that's it for that. Let's go on in to game 2. The Mean Green Killing Machine is off to the races in game 2 of this Warhammer World Championship matchup. We'll be having Showtime on the Greenskins, and Yurine Kotori will be commanding the Tomb Kings in this game 2 matchup. So for the Greenskins, we are going to be having a bunch of skirmish cav vanguarded up front. So we have some Goblin Wolf Rider archers with some Forest Goblin Spider Riders kind of spread out across that front line. And there is also going to be a Night Goblin Shaman vanguarded up in front with the rest of the speed and mobility, and that guy is going to be bringing Vindictive Glare with that Wand of Jet, so going to be casting that Vindictive Glare, popping the Wand of Jet, and going to be retreating right on back behind the rest of their line, just going to be plucking away with that spell throughout the course of the fight. We also do have a Giant River Troll Hag coming in with Spirit Leech, as well as it looks like aspect of the Dread Knight, giving those trolls just a little bit extra leadership, which we get into in a second. We also be having Mither for a little bit of extra control, and we do have Scarstick. Scarstick is going to be rolling in with Fermented Fungi, and I do believe that is Spite of, or Get Back here, so a little extra leadership, especially against the undead, something to be helpful indeed. We have some Savage Orc big guns for the core of that infantry in those center ranks, going to be able to kind of just chunk through most, if not all, of the Tomb King infantry themselves, with the exception of perhaps the Kepra Guard, who should be able to do quite well if they are on the field. We have some goblins, some 8-peak loonies on the far flank. They are unbreakable. They have that Fanatics, which is really going to do a lot of work against the tightly packed Tomb King formation. And we have some more Night Goblin Fanatics on the other side. And so they do have that stock, and they are going to have the Fanatics just like the 8-peak loonies, but they are not going to be unbreakable. We do have a couple of Stone Trolls thrown into the mix as well, going to be regenning throughout the course of the fight, and then they do have very high armor. They have missile resist, they have magic resist. What more could you ask for? Except they do have a very abysmal leadership, but that is exactly what Get Back here with Skarsnik is for, and the mobility should help keep them at least from going too far away from the rest of the main battle, as we do have an Orc Boar Boy on both flanks as well, just securing that perimeter. Now for the Tomb Kings. Tomb Kings are going to be bringing some melee Ushapti. We do have a Tomb Scorpion as well, which is a relatively cheap fear and terror source, and it does have that bonus versus infantry and armor piercing. We have some skeleton spearmen as well for the front line. We have a Necrotech on their chariot. Necrotech is going to be rolling in with, it looks like, pretty much all of their abilities. So we do have the Wrath of the Creator giving +5 melee attack, +6 armor piercing weapon damage to constructs around it. Going to be definitely keeping close to that Tomb Scorpion and those Ushapti. We have Stone Shaper, a little extra missile resist, some more armor. Fan Braces of the Sun, -9 melee, melee attack and plus 22% weakness to fire and an AoE around it. And then the Restore, which is usually what you're going to be seeing on these guys for those constructs. And then definitely that Vambrace of the Sun is going to pair nicely with Cetra the Chariot being, or Cetra the Imperishable being on his chariot, as he does have magical attacks and flaming attacks to boot as well. Rest of the infantry is going to be some Skeleton Spearmen spread throughout the rest of the battlefield. And then we are going to have a bit of mobility as well with the Hecarim Horsemen and some Skeleton Horsemen thrown into the mix as well. But for the very large, heavy hitters in terms of anti-large, it is going to be the Necropolis Knights with halberds. These guys do have that lovely armor-piercing bonus versus large, and they have poison in battle to boot, so they will be able to really cause havoc, especially to Stone Trolls, who is really kind of one of the big driving forces of the Necropolis Knights here in this matchup. But the Tomb Kings definitely have all the tools they need to deal with the Greenskins. Let's see if it's going to be able to pay off for them, as we do have some more Skeleton Archer Chariots as well. But battle is going to be getting underway. We do have a Spirit Leech going down on, good question there, on Cetra the Imperishable. I think it may not be the best target there. I think actually the Ushapti, or even maybe the Skeleton Archer Chariots may have been a little bit better, or the Necropolis Knights with the Necrotech maybe not so much. It won't be able to kill off any models anyways, and that Restore will just be able to heal right through any of those incoming Spirit Leeches. But frontline is going to be getting underway. Ushapti's paired with that Tomb King, or the Tomb Scorpion, and Cetra the Imperishable all getting right into the mix. And this frontline engagement going to be going probably pretty well for the Tomb Kings here, especially with those Necropolis Knights piling on in as well, engaging with those Stone Trolls. And unfortunately for the Greenskins, there is no immune to psychology for their army. Well, they're just going to be banking solely on the buffs to their leadership, while the Skeleton Archer Chariots starting to get into that backline, causing a little bit of havoc there. Tomb Scorpion, though, taking a lot of damage, as is the Ushapti. Really, Stone Trolls do quite well against those guys. And we get a beautiful Fanatics cast going right through all of these Skeleton Horsemen. We also get that Ushap's Incantation of Desiccation coming in from Cetra, really debuffing all of this blob. But in response, we do also get a Fermented Fungi going down on top of Cetra the Imperishable. Unfortunately, he has not lost enough of his health to really cause too much of a problem other than that reduced melee defense. We get another Fanatic coming in from these 8 peak loonies against these Spearmen, so really kind of chewing through most of the undead infantry so far, and the Greenskins off to an early lead in that balance of power. However, these Stone Trolls do get terrified, which is probably one of the problems of not having that immune to psychology, which is why you normally going to be seeing Grom here in this matchup if you're going to be bringing Trolls. And Scarstick kind of losing a lot of his support. He does have some of the support of the Orc Boar Boys. The Wad does go off, though, so that does get some of that immune psychology in. And the Stone Troll is going to be charging forward once more into the breach as they charge forward, trying to deal with Cetra. But Cetra, probably one of the good things for the Greenskins is Cetra's been pretty isolated for the time being, but a little Vindictive Glare going right into the backs of these Orc Boar Boys. That Night Goblin Shaman definitely needs to have a little bit of distance if he is going to be trying to snipe out, do a little bit more damage. We get another Spirit Leech drop down on top of Cetra once again, going to be doing a bit more damage his way, but most of the Greenskins just going to be very content of just kind of sitting back, providing that constant poison DPS into this blob, as they just slowly whittle down this core of the Tomb Kings, as the outskirts have done quite well, as the 8 peak loonies, for example, and even these goblins holding back the ties. So really now the 8 peak loonies are going to be free to kind of cycle around. We get Ushapti summon in that backline, just going to be pushing back all of these Goblin Wolf Rider Archers and all the Forest Goblin Spider Riders, but for the most part they'll be just kind of turning their attention back towards the center, just trying to break apart maybe the Orc Boar Boys, but they are going to be looking to go after these goblins instead. Stone Trolls have taken quite a bit of damage so far. They are getting actually very low in terms of health. Usually you don't see them quite so low before they do end up routing. This time, though, Cetra does end up routing from that ended up getting Rampage from that Fermented Fungi. So that is going to be really restricting his spell casting, so he's not going to be able to get all of those spells off, kind of given those buffs to his own units. The Necropolis Knights are getting whittled down bit by bit, but Ball's power is pretty even at this point. Cetra is going to be looking to kind of finish off that Night Goblin Shaman, and that's Tomb Scorpion is still going strong, and having all of these Necropolis Knights as well, still going to be a fearsome foe on the battlefield. Unfortunately, I am not seeing where that Necrotech has gone. I think that Necrotech may have succumbed. Actually, there's the Necrotech sitting in that fight. So plenty of healing still left to be had, especially I think these the Necropolis Knights are who they want, and as I say that, they do get that Restore off or on top of them, so that's a nice little 1000 HP of healing, so that is quite considerable. However, all of these shots continuing to rain in, but bounce power is creeped right back in straight to the center as all of these Force Goblin Spider Riders, Goblin Wolfrider Archers, all of them are losing a lot of their ammunition. Cetra has been able to deal with that Night Goblin Shaman fairly well, though he does have Mither, he does have Spirit Lich, so he's going to be taking a lot of fire from all of these skirmish cav. But the center engagement is just slowly turning into the favor of the Tomb Kings as they're just able to whittle down everything and all that the Greenskins have to offer. If you take a look, we have some returning units, but for the Stone Trolls, I'm noticing they are not going to be very active here, as one of them is all that remains as they're going to be trying to charge forward. They have lost half their bottles and they're getting very low in terms of HP overall, and they need to be very careful considering Cetra does have, I believe he has Fear and Terror, or he just has Fear on his chariot, but that Tomb Scorpion on the other end does have Terror, so they don't want to be sticking around for too long. Get another Fermented Fungi. It is going to be putting Cetra Rampage one more time, and that might be just enough to allow Skarsnik and the Greenskins to really bring him down. But there is still Necrotech and that Tomb Scorpion are still very dangerous targets here. I mean, just having that Terror at all at this late stage in the fight is really going to be very helpful against like the Stone Trolls, but getting that assistance in with them, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be a get back here not too far away, but Cetra is getting low himself, and that is going to be pushing that balance power back into the Greenskins' favor ever so slightly, but the center engagement is still far from done. The Skeleton Archer Chariots using up the last of their ammunition and about to be crumbling away into the ground, as Cetra is going to be regaining his senses and charging out of this blob, chased very quickly behind by these Orc Warboys, who do have that get back here, surrounding, keeping all of these units in the fight for just a little bit longer, as like all the Savage Orcs are on the brink of wavering. The Stone Trolls that did waver and rout for just a little bit, but they are back and raring to go, but they are getting dangerously low in terms of leadership, and I think they need to be held back in reserve for just a little bit longer, but at this point I don't think it's going to matter too much, as Cetra does fall in the battlefield, and the Greenskins looking rather strong here in this late game, only having to really worry about that Tomb Scorpion, and there is still plenty of infantry left, however, with that generally low leadership, but there is still that Giant Roar Troll Hag who should be able to finish off that Tomb Scorpion, like with Spirit Leeches, and like the Spirit Leech is going to be going the way of that Necrotech, going to be draining that one down, who is going to be crumbling, and that is kind of one of the big things here, is both of these guys are crumbling, so the Greenskins can kind of sit back, relax, and just slowly feed it more and more units as they crumble slowly to dust. I think army losses, though, going to be triggering here any second. As soon as that Necrotech goes down, so does the Tomb Scorpion, and game 2 going to be going to Showtime, as well as the Greenskins are able to pull forward. That was looking a little dicey there for a little bit. That frontline engagement, not really having that immune to psychology, was an interesting idea, but it did work out fairly well for Showtime here in this fight, though I wouldn't be counting on doing that every single time. Take a look at the Greenskins, the Night Goblin Fanatics doing rather well. Those Fanatics really did quite well. Not so much on the AP Loonies, but had these Fanatics 1100 on those guys. The Giant River Troll Hag with all those Spirit Leeches throughout the fight, getting over 2k in total value. Night Goblin Shaman doing a little bit of friendly fire with those Vindictive Glares, but it didn't really have any super good target, especially with that map there, that Toothgrass Hill. That kind of terrain made it so you couldn't really get any downward shots with that Vindictive Glare, and yeah, again, no big Tomb Scorpion or big constructs with like the Necrosphinxes or the War Sphinxes or something like that. So really the Spirit Leeches was all that they needed. Skarsnik doing some okay with those Fermented Fungi definitely helped against Cetra, really kind of cutting off that spell casting from the Tomb Kings for at least a little bit there for 2 of those rampages. Rest of the infantry, these Savage Orcs getting 1100 on them. For the Cav, nothing to really write home about. All of the Skirmish Cav doing rather well, all of them able to pay for themselves and then some. Stone Trolls did okay, but they really didn't do that well, and I think really not having that immune to psychology kind of causing them to flee from the battlefield maybe a little too early, but they did also take a ton of damage, a lot more than you would expect, losing far more models than you often will see, and a lot of that was attributed to these Necropolis Knights, Tomb Scorpion, and the Ushabti, able to get some nice value there, 1500 on the Necro Knights, almost paying for themselves with the Tomb Scorpion, just shy of 1,000. Ushapti did all right to themselves, and then just kind of the rest of the units here real quick. All of these skeletons really just weren't able to do anything. The Necrotech did rather well, and Cetra did pretty good on top of that. But I think a lot of that did kind of come down to, like, I noticed that both Cetra and that Necrotech, they really weren't using their chariots probably to the best of their ability, both of which are meant to be like just cycling in and out of those formations, just causing havoc amongst the Greenskins. And for the most part, I just kind of saw those guys just kind of sitting tight in those engagements, and that's really not how you want to be using chariots. And I think that probably had a little something to do with how the outcome of that game went. But without further ado, let's kind of roll on into Game 3. The elite swords of the Druki going to be marching stoically forced, looking to be hacking and slashing their way through the approaching undead hordes, as the Dark Elves will be facing off against the Vampire Counts, as SHOWtime will be commanding the Dark Elves, and we'll have Yurine Kotori on the Vampire Counts. Now, this is a traditionally very bad matchup for the Vampire Counts, though it does look like SHOWtime has been a little nicer with the deployment, though the army does look very strong, as we do have 2 Blackguard of Nagaron. We have the Blades of the Blood Queen, the Executioners ROR, and they do have Guardians, so that will be allowing Marathi and both of these assassins to have that little bit of extra physical resist. So for Marathi, we are going to be rolling on in with Enchanting Beauty, so -9 melee attack, -8 charge bonus. You also have Heartrender and the Dark Sword, which is going to be giving additional -9 melee attack and melee defense. And then we have Soul Stealer, and we have the Wand of Karedan, which is going to be a nice little doom bolt from the sky coming on in. But really, it is going to be those Soul Stealers and those debuffs with Marathi, which makes her so strong in this matchup. Just the generally low stats of the Vampire Counts is just going to make those debuffs hurt all the more. For the heroes, we do have double K-Knight Assassins, going to be providing poison at range as well as in melee, with that actually pretty nice 70 melee attack and a very respectable missile strength as well, just kind of plucking away given that damage. And they do have a muted psychology, which is always nice against the undead. Web of Shadows on, I believe, both of these guys. So we have Web of Shadows on both, as well as that Assassin's Trophy giving -24 melee defense and melee attack. Web of Shadows is an AoE damage, so able to just kind of further punish the blobbed up counts in this engagement. And we also do have 2 Black Arc Corsairs with handbows, just providing some nice steady DPS, and they do have 360 fire, which is all gonna, actually no, those are for the K-Knight Assassins, but also I believe the Black Arc Corsairs do have that 360 fire on top of that as well. So they'll just be able to kind of keep all of the flyers at bay. We also do have some Witch Elves going to be thrown into the mix, and they do have that Madness of Cain. So if they are able to kind of pluck away at anything, they'll be able to cause them to rampage, -20 speed and -10% melee defense to boot as well, just adding insult to injury, doing a little bit more damage there. We have some Nash's Harvesters going to be in with the Doomfire Warlock's ROR, and they do have the Bound Word of Pain, -30 accuracy and -40 melee attack. And really, that melee attack is what you're looking for, and a Bound Soul Stealer. And again, just another Soul Stealer. What more could you ask for the Dark Elves? But against them is going to be the Counts, and there's going to be plenty of undead. We have the zombies spread all the way across the battlefield. In the sky, we have Manfred von Karstein going to be coming in with a lot of spells. He is going to be bringing the Purple Sun. Purple Sun is going to be a very damaging spell, as he does have just a nuke in his back pocket, and it is going to be a risky pick, but it could work out quite well against the blobbed up Dark Elves. We are going to be having Invocation of Nehek, but I do not see any of the summons, which is, again, like a staple pick. Even if you are going to be bringing the Purple Sun, you almost always are going to be having Raised Dead. Master of the Black Arts, that kind of improved Arcane Conduit. And then we also do have Pestilent Breath. Not going to be bringing his Blade, so he won't be getting that additional regen. But of course, that is only when he is engaged in melee with that item. And that is a little bit of a danger against these Dark Elves, especially with all of those Blackguard on the field. We have some Black Coaches. We have one Black Coach. Going to be cruising through those Dark Elf lines. Terrorgeist as well in the field against any of those large targets. I'm just kind of maybe expecting to see like an Air Force. So like Terrorgeist, since it is bonus versus large armor piercing and poison to boot as well, would do quite well against in an air fight. If Baratheon, there's been a couple of Black Dragons, but that is not going to be the case. So all these Fellbats and stuff going to be electing instead just to kind of chase things off. But there is going to be a bunch of Graveguard with great weapons. Going to be a very nice tool to help deal with like the Blackguard. However, the Harkonness or the Blades of the Blood Queen, the Executioner's ROR, going to be putting a little bit of a hurt into those Graveguard, I fear. Some Dire Wolves on the flanks, again, just kind of chase things off at this point. Some Black Knights. We have a Necromancer who is going to be bringing that raised head, so instead of being on Manfred, it is instead going to be on the Necromancer, just splitting the spells just a little bit in case one got sniped out. So mistake not seeing that earlier. But Van Hell's Dance Macabre, we do have the Raised Dead there, as well as that Forbidden Rod and Master of the Dead, and it's going to be on Vigor Mortis with that Balefire, not in the Unholy. So the Balefire just going to be slowly draining, or not necessarily draining, limiting the magic regen of the Dark Elves, and that is going to be compounded by however many enemy units are surrounded by. The closer the thing gets to the blob of the Dark Elves, the more of that is going to drain, and the less Soul Stealers for the Dark Elves and less Soul Stealers against the Counts is always good news for them. But that is going to be it for the armies, so let's roll on into this thing at full speed as the Blackheart Corsair is going to be firing away, just kind of plucking away at some of these zombies. Most of those shots going to be wasted, and they are going to be falling back, electing to allow the elite frontline infantry and just the Dread Spears kind of take most of that damage there and just kind of deal with these zombies. Shouldn't be too hard of a fight there, and the Blackguard can be held in reserve, especially against like Manfred the Terrorgeist and the likes like that. Going to be needed, and they are going to be kind of reforming those ranks as they did push forward, putting one of their flanks up against this rock formation, which is going to be kind of allowing these Blackguard to be a little bit more defensive. It looks like actually these Blackheart Corsairs might be electing to take the high ground, but yeah, they are going to be pulling right on back, reforming those lines, and a nice breath attack there. Though that is exactly what you need to do with Manfred, is get those breath attacks right down the pipe, taking those Harkonneth Executioners down a peg or two, and they are probably the biggest threat with this army, considering these Graveguard with great weapons will do well enough, I think, to deal with the Blackguard, but like Harkonneth or the Blades of the Blood Queen, that on the other hand is not going to be the case. We do get a summon of zombies going to be looking to try and kind of feed their way into this back line. The Sinesh's Harvesters kind of get a little charge into these zombies, but again, these are all just zombies after all, and looks like we have Yurine. Kotori is playing it rather cautiously on the counts, just kind of slowly feeding zombies one at a time. And this is definitely a matchup where being cautious is going to be helping out. Getting a little pick off on some of these Dread Spears, where we get these zombies, I mean, they're just zombies after all, getting rampage. So nothing really to worry about or to write home, as the Witch Elves do try to kind of poke in. But the Witch Elves would like to kind of pull back at this point. Don't want to be overextending, because having that rampage, especially with these large targets, being able to rampage them into like Blackguard, for example, can even lose the fight for the Vampire Counts if that does happen. So definitely keeping these Witch Elves in reserve. Very nice thing to be having. But Counts just playing it nice and cautiously, just feeding zombies one at a time, waiting for those breath attacks, and all of that Winds of Magic from Manfred. Just kind of utilize that to the best of the ability. We haven't seen a Purple Sun, but as I say that, Purple Sun incoming right into these Blades of the Blood Queen, but unfortunately for the Counts, it is going to be going astray, and that Purple Sun is definitely a little bit of a risk, but Manfred is going to be diving down, and I think that is a risk in and of itself, so that while that Purple Sun did fail, they actually did pop that Murderous Mastery or Murderous Prowess, so that all this slowly feeding things in, pop that early, so it's not going to be used against the elite Graveguard with great weapons. Instead, they just kind of fed zombie after zombie after zombie until that did pop, and now they're just going to slowly wait that out. So looks like Yurine has actually probably played this matchup at least a time or two, as he's playing this rather well so far. Balance Power is actually in the Count's favor at this point. Not necessarily surprised to see it even, but having it in the Count's favor, a little surprised at that. I mean, the damage onto the Blades of the Blood Queen really has only been traded for just some zombies. So I guess that's where most of that change has happened. Everything else staying nice and healthy. Some shots going to be hitting into this Black Coach, doing a nice little bit of damage there. Going to be plucking away at Morathi, but now the Counts are going to have to kind of push forward with the last of their zombies slowly disintegrating, but unfortunately, actually, they did get Rampage. That does stop that outright disintegration and allows them to stay in that fight for just a little bit longer than they had any rights to. The Dark Elves are going to be moving forward as they do kind of slowly deal with the last of the zombies, and now the Counts as well going to be moving forward. Graveguard charging forward should be able to make quick work of these Dread Spears, but they still have to worry about the Blades of Blood Queen. However, I think Manfred's going to be sitting up here nice and careful, like he does have 2 more breath attacks to be used, and these Blades of the Blood Queen are just going to be begging for those breath attacks, and that's exactly where they need to be gone. But the Black Coach does get Rampage. The Witch Elves just giving a little bit of a stab in the rear, and it is going to be rampaging right into the Blackguard, and I think that is going to be all she wrote for that Black Coach. Black Coach not going to be able to survive out of that, as we do get the Necromancer popping Van Hell's Dance Macabre, just given all of these Graveguard items plus 24 melee attack, just to help them kind of just chew through as the Terrorgeist drops down onto the Blades of the Blood Queen, and is actually causing them to Terror Route and route naturally. Graveguard almost got taken out of that, but now all that is left is going to be the Blackguard of Nagaron. Soul Stealer goes down, hitting the Graveguard. I believe it did also hit Manfred von Karstein, so a ton of spells there. And we're all going to want to Karadon. We're getting the Web of Shadows from that K-Knight Assassin. And now the Terrorgeist as well, looking to get in on the action, trying to deal with... Really, Morathi is that target that needs to be dealt with. Get rid of her, and the rest of the Dark Elves will fall. Having those Soul Stealers and another this one was a very beautiful Purple Sun, gonna be hitting the Blackguard, gonna be going right through most of the Dark Elf troops here, doing a little bit of friendly fire to some Graveguard, but really hitting those Blackguard was very nice, especially getting rid of those Witch Elves. And now the Bats gonna be making their play, diving down onto Black of the Blackguard Corsairs, as well as all of the Dire Wolves gonna be charging on forward. And the second Web of Shadows from the other K-Knight Assassin going to be getting in, hitting a couple of the Graveguard, hitting the Necromancer, who has just been slowly using that Web of Shadow, oh, not Web of Shadows, the Forbidden Rod. But Manfred getting rather low, getting stuck in with the Blackguard of Nagaron. But Howard Bounce Power is still heavily in the Count's favor, despite what is left. So these Blackguard going to be holding out very strong. However, the Graveguard with Great Weapons, and there's still plenty of those on the field, going to be able to just chunk through them, despite them being very elite units. They are mostly anti-large, while they do have armor piercing. That most of it is going to be towards that anti-large. Manfred now finishing off, well, trying to finish off the K-Knight Assassin, and it looks like it is going to be able to route that one off, taking another hit for good measure. But Manfred himself getting rather low. It'd be nice if he could get a little heck off on himself. He should have the Winds of Magic for it, but however, using 2 Purple Suns, that very well might not be the case. Going to be getting a Soul Stealer drop down onto the Terrorgeist, just trying to heal up Morathi just enough to keep her in that fight, but the Terrorgeist going to be just kind of keeping her away from the rest of her troops and getting them separated right here. Going to be a pretty fatal flaw here for the Dark Elves, as the Terrorgeist is going to be able to kind of sit nice and on, but a little lapse in micro here, going to be allowing Morathi to regroup with the rest of her forces, get back in with that Blackguard, but she does not have those Blades of the Blood Queen to give her that little bit more of a physical resist. Assassin Trophy does go down on Manfred, reducing his melee attack, melee defense, and the Wand of Kraydon trying to finish the job. He is very low, and if that does hit, it will finish him off, as the bolt does come down from the heavens, and it is going to fall just a little behind the Dark Lord himself. Now, he is at critical binding, but the Dark Elves do rout in the end, and a last-ditch effort to bring down Manfred. Going to be a little short on the draw. Let's take a look at the after battle report, update the scorecard, as well as Yurine maintains his chances in the Warhammer World Championship with a win, defying the odds in what is arguably Count's worst matchup is the Dark Elves, though I think Wood Elves is now a close contender in that. But yeah, this is such a bad matchup for the Counts, but he played it very, very well, very patient, and that is what you have to do in this matchup. You have to be patient. You cannot rush them. If you rush them, you surround them. You're just playing right into the Dark Elves' hands, and they're just going to Soul Stealer you, and that's going to be that. But with how they played it, just kind of slowly threw in some zombies, kind of baited out, I guess, to an extent, but he drew out that murderous prowess, allowed that to be used up early on, wasted it completely, and then came in with his Graveguard, and the Graveguard with great weapons did very well. All of them, 1,200 or 1,300, a lot of damage on those 3 units. Zombies, again, just there for a little bit chaff. Hey, one of them was even able to pay for itself, though. 121. Good job on that guy. Drinks all around. For the rest of the forces, the bats as well being very cautious, coming in only at the end. Direwolf was able to kind of get those Corsairs out of the picture, and the Terrorgeist as well did rather well. However, the Black Coach, on the other hand, not so much, got rampage right into those elite Black Knights, and that is what Manfred, who did a ton of damage. Manfred was able to avoid that misfortune of the Black Coach, though, but he was just able to rack up the value, 3,500. So the Purple Sun, which actually was able to hit those Blackguard rather hard, and those breath attacks as well, really one of the good ways to deal with the elite Dark Elf infantry, and the Necromancer there just kind of helping mitigate, just lessen the amount of Soul Stealers that the Dark Elves are able to get with that Balefire. So I really do like this army. Actually, yeah, it is still a pretty good army. I do like it, having all this Graveyard, and it was played very, very well. Sinesh's Harvesters on the other side getting 1,000 on them. Even the Corsairs did rather well. While the Blazed Blood Queen getting 200 kills, only able to generate 486 in value. All of that was pretty much against zombies. It's got some value against some Graveguard at the end, but the Counts did a very good job at whittling these guys down. Once they're out of the picture, as now the Guardian out of the field, they're able to finish off the rest of the forces in good order. Blackguard did some decent work, but for the most part, the Assassins even doing a ton of work. 1,900 on that one, 1,100 on the other one, just firing away throughout the fight, slowly bringing down Manfred, but unfortunately, that last Wand of Caradon was not able to finish the job, and Marathi and the rest of the Dark Elves did fall to the undead. Definitely a surprising sight, to be sure, but a welcome one nonetheless, as that does mean we get another game. So let's roll right on in to Game 4. Tic-Tac-Toe, Master of the Skies, is going to be gracing us with his presence in Game 4 of this Warhammer World Championship. Going to be rolling on in on his Pterodon, as SHOWtime commands the Lizardmen against the Wood Elves, as they invade upon Bretonnian lands and put threat upon Athaloran. So for the Lizardmen, we do have Tic-Tac-Toe, who has Focus Instincts and just has the Drop Sphere of Tepak, and that does do a nice little bit of damage on the drop, and it does actually slow the enemies who hits or gets hit by that rock as well, just kind of slowing down the approach. And there is going to be just one cast of that, by the looks of things. You don't often see Tic-Tac-Toe, so I have to kind of verify that. We do have a Skink Priest of Heavens as well, coming in with Harmonic Convergence as well as Wind Blast, by the looks of things. So Wind Blast will do well against kind of the tightly packed Wood Elf formation, and then Harmonic Convergence will just kind of help with that front line, allow those Saurus to really kind of do quite well, and there's going to be plenty of those for that front line. So we have Saurus Warriors with shields all the way across the line, and we do have Chameleon Skinks going to be out in front, going to be slowly just plucking away at the Wood Elves on the approach. So going to be kiting the Wood Elves, not something that you're going to be seeing too often, as the flank's going to have some Skink cohorts on both sides, and going to have the Skink cohort with Javelins as well, sitting behind these lines with some Feral Stegodons as some anchors for that kind of front line brawl. We also do have the cohort of Sotek, which is going to be holding this far right flank very well, considering they are unbreakable, and they do have the Refuse to Die, so they cannot die while this is popped, and there's going to be a 20-second duration and a 60-second cooldown, so really they can get those things off pretty often. Chameleon Skinks and more Skink cohorts on this far side of things. Now for the Wood Elves, going to be charging forward for Yurine Kotori. We do have plenty of mobility here, as we have some Glade Riders with Spears, as well as some Wild Riders thrown into the mix of things. Frontline, though, is going to be Dryads, going to be spread across, and Durthu strides forward, and really he doesn't have too much to fear. Those Chameleon Skinks will slowly bring him down with those Skink cohorts as well, but there's going to be no Solar Bastillodons, which is pretty common in this matchup. It is usually those instead of those Feral Stegs, but we are going to be for the Wood Elves going to be breathing a slight sigh of relief, as those things are not going to be forcing old Durthu here to fear for his little old life. He is going to be bringing the Sword of Daith, which is going to do a nice bit of damage in an AoE, and it will also reduce the armor by 30, especially against like Saurus warriors, will allow those dryads to really kind of chunk through them just a little bit quicker than they normally would be able to. But otherwise, not even going to be bringing any spells on Durthu whatsoever. Instead, those are all going to be on the Branch Wraith instead. So the Branch Wraith is going to be bringing just Earthblood. So that is all the spell casting that they have. Rather interesting choice there. Normally, you do kind of see at least something, Flock of Doom, Transformation of Kadan, or something on Durthu. But it's just going to be Earthblood here. And then in the backline, we are going to have some Glade Guard with Starfire Shafts. They have armor piercing, they have flaming attacks, and it's kind of what you expect to see for the ranged for the Wood Elves, and then just some extra Eternal Guard here in that backline, just in case that the Lizardmen went with a little bit extra mobility, keeping all of these range units nice and safe. But they do have to kind of some wily targets on the other end, but both armies looking pretty good, so let's roll things forward as the Wood Elves going to have to be kind of making the approach here. All of these Chameleon Skinks are going to be able to avoid most of the incoming fire from all of these, like Glade Guard, for example, considering they do have a nice little bit of physical missile resist, 40% of it at that. But again, that is not immunity. They will still take damage eventually, and they have a generally kind of low HP pool with 3,600 in total. But Durthu is getting maybe a little bit ahead of the rest of his army here, though he is a very strong force on the battlefield, so he's just going to be waiting in, getting a nice little swing of that blade into the Saurus, as the rest of his Glade Guards just kind of slowly pepper away at him, or at the units around him. And I think he was really just trying to hope that the Lizardmen would kind of just blob up on top of him. In the back of the corridor, so take a mighty charge from these Glade Riders with spears, and might be following up with these Wild Lords, but instead they are going to be pulling right on back. I mean, those Glade Riders, man, did they take a ton of damage from these two skin cohorts with javelins. They just got lit up, ended up routing right off the bat. And more shots still going to be raining into these Saurus on that front line, as the Feral Bastillodon going to be wading through the trees, trying to get on top of these Glade Riders, but those Glade Riders should have the speed and mobility to stay clear of the rest. And more shots just raining into that front line. Looks like this pocket is going rather well for the Wood Elves. However, they still have plenty of range units in the tree line to really worry about. And the Saurus are starting to not do as well as you'd expect. A nice wind blast, though, going through those Glade Guard. Again, probably not doing as much damage, but it is able to knock everything down and kind of prevent them from firing for just a little bit of duration, as the Skin Cohort have pretty much used up all of their ammunition and are now going to be getting a nice surround off on these Eternal Guards. However, the Saurus Warriors really don't need any help dealing with Eternal Guard. They'll trade very well into them. It's really kind of the Dryads and their physical resist, but the rest of the Wood Elf army just kind of looking a little bit under pressure, as there's just kind of gaps forming up in that formation. Dryads probably a little too condensed in this little pocket here, as it does open that door right into these archers, and the Feral Bastillodon is going to be sensing that little opening, going to be getting in, and it is going to be a very hard unit to really get rid of. Having that Fear Terror, the very high armor, I mean, it has 140 armor, Fear and Terror bonus versus infantry armor piercing, and it's just going to be able to make good work of these Glade Guards. Not necessarily quick work, but it will finish them off in due time. And for the most part, though, it is kind of keeping them from firing. All the rest of the Wood Elves just kind of getting shot to pieces by all these Skin Cohorts with javelins. They have just very little ammunition, but their DPS with that is very, very high. However, now that they have used up their ammunition, it is pretty much just Chameleon Skinks left to really deal with Durthu. They do have the two Feral Bastillodons with some armor piercing to kind of chunk through Durthu, but a lot of the options to deal with them, like especially like the Chameleon. I mean, the Chameleon Skinks having just as much ammunition as they have, so that is one thing. The Lizardmen have been very conservative with that. But losing all the ammunition on the Skin Cohort is going to hurt that just a little bit, especially as Durthu is going to be getting into melee with these Chameleon Skinks, but they are all going to be kiting away from him, as Durthu is just going to be slowly trying to catch up, but those Chameleon Skinks will be able to keep themselves at bay. Rest of the Wood Elf army, though, not looking so great, considering most of the infantry, if not all of it, has pretty much been depleted, leaving just the Glade Guard to kind of fend for themselves against some very angry dinos, getting a nice little charge in. Going to be terrifying these Glade Guard off and should probably be routing them on that charge, as Durthu looking more and more alone. He still has his Branch Wraith, but Branch Wraith is kind of getting surrounded by Saurus here, and Durthu is getting turned into a pincushion as all of these Chameleon Skinks just kind of rain fire among them. Eternal Guard Dryads on the flanks, still holding out, but Tic-Tac-Toe, not Tehenowen. Tic-Tac-Toe is going to be making his debut into the battle as he charges on forward. The Sword of Death does go down, though. It's going to be hitting these Chameleon Skinks. He's going to be hitting Tic-Tac-Toe and all of these Skink cohort. But now we do have Durthu, and there's a little funky maneuver here, as the banner was still saying there, as Tic-Tac-Toe did a little funky attack animation going high and away from Durthu, but diving right back in, as now he's going to be pulling out, leaving that duel to that Feral Bastillodon, and Durthu should be able to do a nice little bit of damage here, but he is going to be taking some in return, especially being poisoned by the Chameleon Skinks, for example. Definitely going to be hurting him and then some, but Lizardmen have that pretty hefty balance of power favor at this point in the fight. Branch Wraith getting very low, and considering just how much Chameleon Skinks are still left, all the Skink cohorts chasing off the rest of the archers, and just the two Feral Bastillodons, that is just, I think, a little too much for even Durthu to really get rid of, as Tic-Tac-Toe is just going to be using his speed and mobility, trying to get rid of the Branch Wraith, and should be trying to pull out here just before Durthu kind of comes in, and that's exactly what he does. But right back into it, a Glutton for Punishment takes a hit from that mighty blade of Durthu, and I don't think Tic-Tac-Toe wants to be staying around any too longer. He is very much a squishy character. I think balance power here just about at army losses, and I think Durthu is going to be succumbing to just the mass of Lizardmen that are still surrounding his presence. And it looks like that is going to be our series for the day. I don't think Durthu is going to be able to pull this one back. Just too many different places for him to go. And all of these Chameleon Skinks, yeah, they're just going to whittle him down bit by bit. They have enough armor piercing where, yeah, they are going to be able to bring down the Titan, as the Feral Bastillodon is still withstanding the onslaught. But there is army losses. Durthu is going to be routing, and Showtime will be advancing to the round of 32, and Yurine Kotori does fall 3-1. Take a look at the after battle report, update the scorecard to reflect the final score here, and we'll see just how things did fare. So the Wild Riders really unfortunately not doing all too well, as did most of the cavalry for all of the cavalry. For the Wood Elves, the Archers actually did some decent work, able to generate some nice value, 600, 800 on these two. Frontline, even the Dryads were able to do pretty decent work, able to get some of them over 500. Eternal Guard, on the other hand, not so well. And Durthu, he just wasn't... It's not so much that he wasn't able to get into the situations he wanted to. It was just that the Lizardmen did a very good job of avoiding him. They knew that Durthu was a major threat, but they also knew that if they just left him for last, then he would just rout, and that is exactly what happened, and did play very well at that. I mean, Showtime is a very good player. He has been doing exceptionally well lately, and definitely showed here as he played around Durthu very well, just finishing off everything and anything else in the Wood Elf roster, and leaving the big tree man for last. Both of the Feral Bastillodons did some nice, decent work on just kind of absorbing as much damage as possible. I mean, that 140 armor is considerable, so it's really hard to kind of chunk through all of that, and just having that fear and terror with that high armor pretty much means that it's going to be around pretty late in the game, unless you are really able to focus it down with like Way Watchers or something of that nature. And then all the Chameleon Skinks, just so much ammunition left, very conservative in that department. Man, I mean, look at these Skink cohorts with javelins getting 1,000 in value. That is pretty much just from the ranged attacks. That is pretty impressive, generating that much in this fight. Even the rest of them did very well, being able to use up their shots. Cortisotek, and then all of the Saurus warriors able to get a nice bit of value, 1,200 on those guys. So some nice, decent amount of damage. Skink Priest of Heavens, the Wind Blast, we saw one of them go off on those Glade Guard. It didn't do that much damage, but was able to generate some. Tic-Tac-Toe was, Tic-Tac-Toe was there. He's a very cheap lord, so if that's kind of what you're worried about, you can bring him, and he is quick, so he can kind of be where you need him. And of course, that slow does help when you are just trying to slow down all of the Wood Elves, but he is also very risky. I mean, a single volley from Way Watchers, I think, can just outright kill him if he does get kind of locked in place. So there is that little risk, but not too much lost if he does go down. Well, that is going to be it for the series. Showtime takes it 3-1, and he will be moving on forward. So very well played to both sides. Some very fun matches. And that is all I'm going to have for you today. I do hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, have a good one.